Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I've followed you with great interest before you were even in partisan politics. You've always been on the watch for jihad, and not just the violent jihad of terrorism, but the slow creep of Sharia law, which in my view is a greater risk. Why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and how you came into politics? What did you do before you were in partisan politics?
Well, I was in the Labour Party actually for quite a long time, for about 9 years when I lived in London. I came to this politics. I get that my life has sort of taken a route I didn't expect it to take. I was a law student about 10 years ago, perhaps longer, about 15 years ago now. I'm getting old. And I met a girl, I became friends with a woman on this course who was a devout Muslim. And I was completely naive about all of these things at that point. I knew nothing about Islam. But while a law student, I both discovered that there were Sharia councils operating in the UK. I discovered details about Sharia law. And I became friends with someone who explained to me the pressures on her in her life, her family's treatment of her, the fact that her sister was on the run from her brothers who would kill her if they found her. All of this stuff was really shocking to me. So I began looking into Sharia law. I began looking into Islam. I read the Quran. And I was horrified. And I'm not a person who can sit still. So I started to sort of get active. I started off with One Law for All. And that went wrong when I realized that left-wing politics was actually the problem. I was never an extreme lefty, but I was Labour. And I realized quite over time, things like FGM that was being not taken seriously by Labour, and they were colluding in covering this stuff up, and the rape gangs. Well, I didn't know about the rape gangs at the time, but that was where it was going, and I was seeing more and more of this from Labour and from the left. So I parted ways with One Law for All, which was very left-wing based, and began exploring and talking to different people. I spoke to some people who had been involved with the EDL, and my world really just changed. I joined UKIP about months or so after I left Labour. It was the only party talking about multiculturalism, for example. I very much admired Nigel Farage's outspokenness, as I think a lot of people did. And it went from there, really. I was selected as a parliamentary candidate for UKIP in 2015. I was selected again in 2017 for the same seat, and the next day deselected by the then leader, Paul Nuttall, for my views on Islam. I then decided, what the hell, I will go for the leadership. UKIP had a terrible result in the 2017 election, and Paul Nuttall resigned. And I thought, well, look, let's see. I'll stand for the leadership. We'll see where the land lies regarding Islam. For a while, it looked like I could win. And there was, I'm afraid to say, a smearing campaign against me by many in UKIP, including the eventual victor, Henry Bolton, who had tried to tried to have me taken off the ballot paper. And I had no choice but to leave. I was tired, frankly, of trying to battle inside parties to get people to listen about Islam. And while UKIP was the best, it just wasn't good enough, and it wouldn't let us speak openly and with uncomfortable truths. So I thought, the only way I'm going to be able to speak openly, and the way we are going to be able to speak openly without having to win internal battles, is to form a new party, and that's what I did.
You've said a lot of interesting things there, and I'd like to unpack a little bit of that. There's an irony in the man who won that leadership, Henry Bolton, you mentioned him. Henry Bolton's argument against you is you're too extreme, you're too focused on the issue of Islam. I have to note the irony that it was Henry Bolton who, his dalliance with a girlfriend many years his junior, who herself made a large number of racist comments online. It was Bolton, and I suppose you can't blame him for what his girlfriend says, but what irony that his warning against you, he was the one we needed, or UKIP voters needed to be warned about, that he imploded and left in disgrace. Now, I'm glad he's gone because I admired Gerard Batten, but there was a bit of an irony there. I just felt like I needed to mention it. I think he was a faker in so many ways, and he was a great disappointment.
Yes, and I think faker is probably quite a harsh but quite accurate word. I saw a lot of that during the hustings, and in the initial stages, I was getting a lot of applause for what I was saying about Islam. And I didn't always talk about Islam, but I can assure you people from the audience always did. I was getting a lot of applause for this, and as suddenly Henry Bolton found an interest in Islam. I don't trust politicians who change their tune with the wind. And again, he proved that he was not serious about this when he tried to get me taken off the ballot paper, having, of course, said that he would listen to the members, and he was all about the members, and then tried to get me taken off the ballot paper. And then he won. And then he won by quite a significant jump. So there was nothing left really for me to do than
you know, I admire the British singer Morrissey and the Smiths, the band he had. I mean, I grew up here in Canada, but of course he's world famous. And I always found him an interesting and peculiar political figure, an unconventional mix of things that would sometimes startle his fans, because he's not a traditional down-the-line liberal leftist as most entertainers in Hollywood are, because I think he actually thinks about it. He doesn't just say, I'm going to go with the flow and say, I'm against global warming, I'm for world peace, like the boring platitudes. I think Morrissey broods on things. And your battle in UKIP was, if, you know, I'm not insulting you to say it, it was an obscure internal battle, but Morrissey noted it. And when he rolled out his new album recently, he talked about you and your case and how he felt you were robbed of the win. What do you make about Morrissey and his more recent statements that you are the closest? I mean, I'm fascinated by it. Have you had any dealings with Morrissey? What do you make of the fact that he supports you?
I'm delighted. And it shows, and it's giving the party the scope and the identity that I wanted it to have. We're attracting people from all walks of life. I think one of the things that Morrissey's particularly attracted to us, and is something that he and I have in common, and I don't know him at all, I've never met him, but I think one of the things we have in common is animal welfare, and that's something that millions of people in this country are very, very concerned about. They want an end to halal and kosher slaughter, and we're the only party to talk about that and to campaign for an end to this cruelty to animals. I think that was one big thing that attracted him to us. And I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased to be appealing to all kinds of people. This is what I wanted to do and what I want our party to be.
I have a question. Some of your critics, and I hope you don't mind putting a criticism to you, but it gives you an opportunity to answer it, say you're outstanding on the subject of Islam. And I've seen your political brochures. You recently ran in a by-election. We can talk about that by-election in a moment. But your critics would say, on issues other than Islam, you remain, you have an overlap with, let's say, a Jeremy Corbyn. You're a leftist social justice activist. I don't know if I would put animal welfare in that category. What would you say to that criticism? Is it well-founded? Where do you stand on other issues other than Islam? Would you characterize yourself as a conservative, a Labourite, a Green Party member? Who are you?
I don't characterize myself as any of those. I don't need a label. I think political labels are damaging. I'm a policy by policy person. Some of the things I believe in, I guess, would come on the left, like the National Health Service. I'm a huge supporter of the National Health Service. I'm very, very clear and unequivocal on that, because I don't want the poorest people in our country having to worry about healthcare bills. I think the NHS is a good thing. I'm very patriotic. I love the country. I believe in the nation state. I believe in the free market. So that would put me on the right. But I also believe in public sector, and I believe in an efficient public sector. And I believe in a public sector run by the public. I don't, for example, believe that taxpayers' money should be paid and with ridiculous procurement prices. If you look at the NHS, for example, they're paying hundreds of pounds for things that cost a couple of pounds. This kind of thing goes across the public sector, and huge amounts of public money is being spent to private companies and hasn't made it any more efficient. And I think if the taxpayer is paying for something, the taxpayer should be prioritised. That would probably put me on the left. I am who I am. I think these are common sense policies, and I think there's a sort of a fair middle ground. You know, we believe in employee rights, but we also believe in the rights of businesses to fire inept employees, with that fair middle ground, which is neither on the left or the right. And it's really how my own politics is how I am as a person and how I want and hope the party will develop, because I think I'm like most people. I think most people are neither on the far end of anything. I think we need to reach the decent middle ground and be fair and just, and that's what I want us to be.
I want to talk about the absence of the social left in tackling Islam. It is a fact that women are not free under Sharia law, that gays are stoned to death. That actually happens in places like Iran and Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan and Pakistan. Feminism does not exist. Homosexuality, well, I remember Mahmoud Ahmadinejad of Iran simply declaring that it doesn't exist in Iran. Well, that's because if he finds it, he kills it. Where are the leftists, identity politics activists from the 80s and 90s? Where are they now when the threat comes not from the Catholic Church or the Protestant Church, but rather from Islam? Where are they?
Well, we've sunk into a pit, a real pit, where people are terrified. I mean, you saw what happened. If you speak up about any of these issues, even if you feel it, if you speak up, you will get it. You know, they will turn on you. The extreme left dominates. It dominates trade unions. It dominates the Labour Party. And people are afraid. Ordinary, non-hard leftists in these organisations are afraid to say anything because you'll immediately be assaulted as racist and fascist, and you'll lose your position. So some people are afraid. Other people are still just too wedded to that oppressor-oppressed notion, that the white man is the oppressor no matter, and the brown-skinned person is the oppressed no matter the circumstances, no matter who the brown-skinned person is or what they advocate, they are still the oppressed, and no matter what the white person advocates, they are still the oppressor. This identity politics is so ingrained that some people just can't seem to get out of it. But I think overwhelmingly it's a common anti-Western, anti-capitalist, anti-democracy that unites them. You can see it with Brexit. The vote has inconvenienced them. It happened with Trump. It happened with Brexit. This pesky democracy keeps producing results we don't like. Therefore, we'll have to go after democracy. And of course, Islam is anti-democracy and the left is anti-democracy. And they make great allies. And they're using each other. They're using each other. But of course, Islam is injecting that element of fear into things which the left loves. And everyone can close any objectors down, any dissent is crushed. And because Muslims aren't white, and overwhelmingly aren't white, the race card is thrown. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. I don't know where they are. I know they're doing if there are any genuine ones left who actually do care about women's rights or gay rights, I suggest they find some guts and some courage, because this is dangerous stuff that's going on. People are being killed. People are living in fear. In our country, in Great Britain. And when political candidates such as myself try to speak out about it, we are physically shut down. Our events are physically shut down by violent mobs while the police do very little. That's the situation we're in. If there are any genuine feminists or gay rights campaigners out there, now's the time to make yourself.
Mm-hmm. When Tommy Robinson used to work for us, I would visit him, I don't know, about once every month or so, and we would go out. I mean, Tommy didn't like to stay in the studio. We would go out in the street. We would go to other cities. For example, Sunderland, which is near Newcastle. It feels like a completely Labour city. Yeah. I'd have to check. I don't think any politician in that whole town is anything other than Labour. So obviously the local citizens vote for Labour. That's how that happened. But Tommy's support there, and I remember we had the case of Chelsea Wright, who was targeted by a Muslim predator. We won't go into the details of that case now. But they're voting for Labour.
Yeah.
Why is it, or how is it, that the same people who are the most victimized by Muslim rape gangs, to quote Morrissey, working class people who are nobody's nothings. They don't have a friend in Parliament. They're not fancy people. They don't have a wealthy friend. They're not connected to the power establishment. I think it's a classist thing. The people that are the targets of these rape gang predators are invariably working class girls. But those same working class Brits who say they support Tommy and who are the victims of these rape gangs I think they're voting Labour. Am I wrong?
Well, they must be, and someone must be, because they keep winning seats. In Rotherham, they, after the scandal had broke about Rotherham, they went out and voted for Labour again, knowing fully that this was the local council, the social workers, the police in this heavily Labour town, all essentially allowed this to happen. Out went the people of Rotherham and voted for Labour again. It is a mystery. It's a mystery. It's a mystery I would like to solve, but there are different aspects. There are several aspects to it, I suspect. One is habit. We are very much a two-party country, two major parties, and people are allied, aligned to them. We have people who grew up in Labour areas would never dream of voting Tory, and vice versa. We have this habit. We also have the electoral system, which a lot of people worry about, because it's first past the post, and if people will worry that if they don't vote for Labour, that the Tories will get in, and if people worry if they don't vote Tory, Labour will get in, and so there's a lot of tactical voting goes on. Mm-hmm. But I see it as our job. I also think that a large reason that people still vote Labour is because they haven't actually had a real decent alternative for a very long time. Someone who really speaks to and for the working class and who actually cares about the working class. Labour disappeared from the working class decades ago. And I think people are realising that more and more. Mm-hmm. It's an enormous task, though, for a smaller party to break through, largely because of the media. The media smears and lies. The media is establishment. It's the same establishment as the establishment parties, and they don't much want the status quo being disturbed by uppity little parties. So it's very, very difficult, but it's definitely doable. I mean, if you look, Labour itself came out of nowhere and became very successful very quickly 100 or so years ago, and the Scottish National Party back in 2015 swept Labour out of Scotland, absolutely swept Labour out of Scotland. So it is doable. And I think politics are changing. I think people are changing. I suspect the next 20 years will be a big change in electoral politics in this country. At least I hope, but I do expect.
Well, in a way, the UKIP was that challenger, and they did have at least a partial focus on open borders and immigration. I don't think they embraced the Islamic question as squarely, and they didn't start that way. I mean, their symbol was the British pound, which I think summarized so much of their provenance. But there are anti-immigration, anti-Islam parties in Europe. Look at Italy, their new government. Geert Wilders in Holland, the second largest party. The AFD, the Alternative for Deutschland party, the Ascendant party in Germany. Look at Hungary, Austria, Poland. So parties have come from nowhere, even in Sweden. Yeah. The anti-immigrant party is on the ascent. In Norway, it's part of the governing coalition. So it is possible for something to come from nowhere if the incumbent parties continue to ignore the crisis. I got a question for you. You ran as the candidate in a recent by-election in, is the district called East Lewisham, is that right?
Lewisham East, yeah.
Lewisham East, thank you. And I'm going from memory here, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. I think the UKIP candidate got 1.7% and you got 1.2%. You add them together, that's almost 3%, but you add them together and maybe you get a feeling of momentum, and maybe you're not 3%, so maybe you're 6%. And so maybe next time you're 10%, and then you're on the radar. And I guess what I'm saying is the splitism. There's so many little parties. I looked at the results. There must have been 10 candidates running there. Is there any chance, and I'm saying this as an outsider, I'm sure there's lots of internal politics, but I can't help but notice that you and the UKIP were both in the same zone. Is there any chance that there could be a unity? Or are you just too biologically different as parties, the DNA of your parties too different for Britain and UKIP under Gerard Batten?
Yes, I think it is too different. I think UKIP is the past, and I think For Britain is the future. And I think that the electorate sees UKIP as the past. I think post-referendum, it was seen as having done its job, and I don't see anything truly inspiring coming out of it. I don't really think it can be reinvigorated. I don't envisage that Gerard Batten will be leader for very long. Actually, I think the knives are already coming out for him because of his stance on Islam. And I've been in UKIP. I know the battle, the internal battle I go on about this issue. We don't need it. We don't need it. You know, we're an exciting new party, and membership has grown since Lewisham, and we're looking forward. And I think on issues that were very different to UKIP, such as the NHS. The NHS is a huge issue for people, and UKIP have been either vague or individuals within it have talked about privatising the NHS. These are things that the working class public in particular, and I don't see that UKIP was the vehicle to take the working class vote away from Labour at all. It was seen as a big business party because Nigel Farage was a big businessman. And there was certainly no strong relationship abandoned by Labour working class communities. I don't see us as being the same. We may, with Gerard Batten in charge, have similar views on Islam, but we do not have similar views on immigration, and we do not have similar views on how to talk about and how to tackle Islam. I want us to talk about the religion itself. I want us to talk about immigration. 47% of the British public wants a ban on immigration from Muslim countries. That's a strong position. And if almost half the country feels that way, someone's got to talk to them, and someone's got to talk about it. These are not people who hate immigrants. These are not people who don't want a complete end to immigration. They see the problems. They see the FGM. They see the child marriage. They see the fact that the police are bowing down, literally bowing down in some cases at mosques, to Islam. A day after the Manchester bombing, senior police being photographed inside a mosque holding the Quran, smiling. People are furious about this. They're furious, and they don't want platitudes about how it's the ideology, it's not the people, and we mustn't upset the moderate majority. Nigel Farage appears to believe that the vast majority of the world's Muslims believe in secular democracy. They don't. They don't. And every survey of Muslims around the world will show you that. And we're talking about Muslim immigration, so it matters if people in Pakistan, for example, support stoning to death as a matter of routine, which they do, and then you're opening up your country to people who are so in such a different, not just a different country, but a different century, that they actually believe you should stone a woman to death even if she was raped. You're opening up your border to people who believe this. It is it's just so incompatible with our society. And people know this, and they're tired of dancing around it. And I don't want to unite with UKIP so we can have another internal row that will drag on and on and on about what we can say about Islam and what we can't. I'm tired of it. We need to move on to a new future. And that is us. That is ForBritain.
We're talking with Anne Marie Waters. She's the leader of ForBritain, a former candidate for the leadership of UKIP. You recently shared a stage in London at a rally to support our old friend Tommy Robinson. You shared that stage, if I'm not mistaken, with Gerard Batten, the leader of UKIP, and I think Lord Pearson, a UKIP peer, a member of the House of Lords. If I'm not mistaken, he was there. He certainly has shown a soft spot for Tommy. I understand he took Tommy through the House of Lords, had him to lunch in a very ostentatious, taking him around the dining room to shock all his more mild-mannered colleagues. I like the style of that guy. The fact that you had these UKIP individual personalities share a stage with you for Tommy Robinson tells me that there is some courage there. Have you had any personal interactions with Pearson or Batten? And I say this, and I'm not trying to meddle from 2,000 miles away, or however many miles we are here. I'm not trying to meddle. I'm just trying to learn what's going on, because I admire Batten and I admire Lord Pearson very much, actually. I think he was very brave. He's asked very pressing questions about Islam in the House of Lords. I've seen the videotape of it, and he certainly doesn't seem to be shy. Have you had any interactions with these men, even if you can't divulge the confidentiality of the subject matter? Have you talked to them at least?
I've known Lord Pearson for some years. It was Lord Pearson who actually persuaded me to join UKIP. I've known him for some time. I like and admire him like you. I like and admire Gerard Batten. But they're the only two. They've been saying this, yes, but they're the only two. And that internal back, they've been denounced for it. And I hear again that the knives are coming out for Batten. And Nigel Farage has spoken up, saying it was a mistake to support Tommy Robinson. And as far as I'm aware, there are some MEPs now expressing concerns about this and wanting this pro-Tommy campaign halted. But I still, over the years, this hesitation about Tommy Robinson has been there. And now suddenly it's disappeared. I was told not to be photographed with Tommy Robinson now by people who are now being photographed with Tommy Robinson. I just don't trust it. It's politics, sure, but it's a cynical politics, and it's a vote. It's a vote grabbing exercise. I'm sorry to say.
You know, I have to tell you, I remember the first time I interviewed Tommy Robinson on TV, I had heard 1,000 lies about him, and I was nervous. I won't lie to you. I remember asking him, I remember saying, how do you feel about the Jews? Like, that's a weird question to put to someone, but I just thought, let me just ask it. And so I had to work my way through this bodyguard of lies that his enemies had put around it. You know, it was Churchill who said the truth is so precious it must be protected by a bodyguard of lies. But the bodyguard of lies around Tommy Robinson was by his enemies, who didn't want you to find out the truth lest you realize he's actually a good man. And so I was trepidatious at first, but then I as I got to know him, as you know, the rest is history. We hired him and we turned him into a journalist, for better or for worse. Now we inflicted him upon the world. Let me ask you, I mentioned that you shared a platform with Geert Wilders of the Party for Freedom. Have you, and again, I'm not asking you to reveal confidences, but have you had any guidance or best practices or here's how we did it from Wilders or any of these other continental parties that started as obscure fringes, but now are serious players or even governments? Have you talked to the five-star Northern League types? Have you talked to Alternative for Deutschland?
No, but it's a huge priority. I haven't spoken to Alternative for Deutschland yet, but we are having a conference this year. And a huge priority for me is a pan-European campaign against the European Union. I don't have much faith in Brexit. I'm not sure what kind of Brexit we're going to get next March. I suspect not a very substantial one. But I believe that we can't escape the EU while the EU exists. So it's very important for anti-EU people across Europe to get together and to aim as high, yes, as bringing down the European Union so we can restore our nation states and be Europe again. This is a very high priority for me. And we will, it's something. I was in France recently. I'm in contact with people. It's a huge priority for me. I have met Geert Wilders. I spent a week with him in Australia a few years ago. He is a wonderful man, a wonderful, brave man. I met his wife, a lovely woman. He's a hero. He's a hero. He did tell me, he keeps giving me one tip about interviews. He said, we will always have one clear punch you want to land in every interview and make sure that you do it. So I decided to notch that up to 2. But he's a wonderful man and a great hero, and I'm honored to have spent some time.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of speaking with him on a bit of a Canadian tour some years ago as well. You've been with us for half an hour. I appreciate your time. I want to ask a couple more questions. Before I got into the Rebel and the Sun News Network before that, I was involved with a series of political parties in Canada, including a grassroots startup that we called the Reform Party that grew into the Canadian Alliance, and it finally merged with our rivals on the right, and it formed the Conservative Party of Canada, which formed government. And it had not been able to form government until it merged with its rivals on the right. So that's in the back of my mind as a conservative in Canada. I don't think you would call yourself a conservative except on the matter of Islam, if I'm hearing you right. But
no, I don't agree with that. I think on immigration, on nationalism, I'm a strong believer in the nation state, and I love this nation state very, very deeply, which would probably be a conservative value.
Yeah, so I accept that, and I would put it to you that especially in 2018, especially in the UK, national identity is more important than a few points higher or lower in a tax rate. I absolutely would acknowledge that. I want to ask you, though, when I was referring to my own experience in a startup grassroots party organization, infrastructure, fundraising, people who know how to put on a proper event, people who know how to run a website, a mailing list, people behind the scenes are critically important, not just the front of house talent. And can you speak to, because we're going to send this email out to our UK supporters. So we're going to send this out to 152,000 Brits. I'm a Canadian, I'm just an observer from afar. But if there's someone in Lewisham East, if there's someone in Sunderland who's saying, well, I've heard of this Anne-Marie Waters and I like the cut of her jib, but do you even have a capacity to absorb them, put them in a machine, and go to battle to win? What do you have to say about your party structure and the people backing you? Do you have a team?
Of course, we have a committee, and our committee is made up of some people with great political experience. Some from UKIP, came over from UKIP. Others who have never been involved in politics before, and I'm quite excited about that. I like the fact that I regularly receive messages from people telling me they've never been involved in politics before, and this is the first time. I'm quite excited about that. It's a difficult job. We started off with a few people sitting in a living room, and in all honesty, I would say history is made by a few people in a living room. People need to come on board and make it happen, and that's the message I really want to get out. I want everyone, if people, no matter what their past, if they were involved in the EDL, if they were involved in various groups which UKIP have banned, for example, I want them to come to us. We will judge everyone as an individual. I want people from all walks of life to come to us and make it happen. In terms of our branches, we have more and more opening up each week. My diary is full in visiting areas of the country where people want me to come and speak, and then we're setting up branches on the night. So more and more branches are developing. It's not easy. It's not easy. None of this is going to be easy. But if people get on board and make it happen, rather than waiting for it to happen, we'll get there a lot sooner. But we'll get there.
I have one last question. You mentioned the EDL, which was rather rambunctious, so much rambunctious, not just in style, but Tommy left them, the group he founded, because he felt they were being overtaken by elements that were racist, and Tommy's not a racist. So you're saying you want to bring these people in from the cold, and I understand that message, to give them a more legitimate vehicle, so they're not forced to the fringes. I get that, and that's an excellent message, but it also makes you vulnerable to what the left calls deplatforming. So you have an event somewhere. Tommy faced this all the time. Tommy had book events scheduled, signed a contract, paid a deposit. Antifa threatens the bar, the club, the conference center. They cave in and rip up the contract. Even we in Canada have faced deplatforming. How do you deal with people who don't debate you, but rather who silence you either through threatening physical venues or the censorship of social media, deplatforming you off? I think you're still on all these platforms, but Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. What about the threats of censorship?
Well, one thing we don't do is give in to them. We can't allow far-left bullies to dictate what we do with our party. We are vulnerable to these smears from the left, but not because we don't ban people from the EDL, but because we criticize Islam. All you have to do to be far right in this country is criticize Islam. You could be from the Green Party. The moment you open your mouth about Islam in a negative manner, you're far right. So we're vulnerable to this anyway. This is going to happen anyway. But what I won't let them do is dictate what goes on inside our party and who can join and who can't. And as for ex-BNP, we get a lot of this criticism from the hard left because we don't ban ex-BNP. Well, first of all, people change. People were never... It was a racist party, yes, but many people voted for it, for example, who were not racist, but if they were concerned about immigration, they had absolutely nowhere else to go. I want those people to know that they are welcome. And there's also an inconsistency, surprise, surprise, from the left on this. Let's look at Maajid Nawaz. He was a member of Hizb ut-Tahrir, a group far worse than the BNP, and yet he's a hero who stood for the Liberal Democrats as a parliamentary candidate for the Liberal Democrats. He's not only forgiven but treated as a hero, whereas if anyone was in the BNP for a week, they'll never ever be forgiven. They'll always be a fascist and a racist. I won't indulge in that. People are individuals, and of course we don't want actual racists or anti-Semites or any of these nasty people. They will come and we'll throw them out, and they'll come largely because the press lies about us and calls us these things. That's why they're attracted to us. And we will throw them out. But there are decent people who were either voted for or were involved in activism with the BNP who are not racist or anti-Semites, but who had absolutely nowhere to go. And my worry is that if moderate voices like mine don't deal with this issue, you will see a rise of the real far right. Because the Islam problems are not going away. They're going to get worse and worse. Our politicians, their response is disgraceful. I was prevented. I was a legitimate, bona fide parliamentary candidate who was prevented from going to a hustings event for my own safety, an event which the leaflets of which were supported by the Labour Party. This is the party of opposition, a party that could be in government. And they are endorsing this mob mentality that shuts people down. But we are vulnerable to it regardless, and we're vulnerable to it because we talk about Islam. And what I certainly won't let them dictate to me who can or can't join ForBritain.
Well, we'll leave it there. Anne Marie Waters, what a pleasure to spend some time with you today. I appreciate you talking with us.
Thank you very much, Ezra. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you. Well, there you have it. Our feature.
We will make America great again.